They are immortals. Born across ages and continents, in times of war and peace, of faith and despair. They are not alone. There are others like them, some noble, some cruel. For centuries, they have lived among us, warriors, lovers, wanderers. They have battled each other through the ages, with holy ground their only refuge. Through endless lives and countless battles, they seek purpose, redemption, or dominion. They cannot die unless you take their head, and with it, their power. In the end, there can be only one.
Silence had settled in the car like a cloud of ash, dense and sticky. Alice gripped the steering wheel with uncharacteristic tension. She stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched, overly focused on the empty road. Methos hadn't attempted to speak. He knew how to recognize a silence that was better left unbroken. He hadn't truly looked at her either. His gaze had grazed her profile, the angle of her jaw, the stiffness of her neck. And he had looked down. There was nothing to say that could repair what had just happened. He sank deeper into the passenger seat, crossed his arms, and let his mind drift. It was easy. He'd had 5,000 years of practice. Darkness engulfed him without warning. Another silence, older, deeper, a suffocating heat, mingled with the smells of sweat, leather, and dried blood. A low sky heavy with red dust, and in that apocalyptic light, a city in its death throes. Methos moved through the corridors of Shar-Talem's palace like a shadow. He wasn't a man of power here, not a general nor a king, just a foreign advisor who came from who knows where. A soothsayer, some said. A spy, others whispered. But demon, the old priest of the fire temple affirmed, looking at him through the smoke. None of them guessed what he truly was. He had been there for nearly 7 years, arriving in a merchant convoy from the Aegean Sea, back when Shar-Talem was still thriving, a fertile crossroads between the Euphrates kingdoms and the desert caravan routes. He had slipped among the scribes, gained the crown prince's trust during a public debate on omens and eclipses, and very quickly he had found himself in private council. Never at the center, but always in the shadow of power. It wasn't the first time he had acted this way. He knew empires crumbled. He observed them, crossed through them, abandoned them. But this time, he had stayed. Why? He couldn't have said. The illusion of some stability, perhaps, or simply the weariness of fleeing. He wasn't waiting for anything, not really. He no longer believed in men, nor their gods, nor their walls. But he didn't want to see them all die, either. He hadn't grown attached to them, but he hadn't managed to remain completely indifferent. And perhaps that was what worried him. That morning, he felt the ground vibrate even before the scouts returned. Not an earthquake, a tension, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. For several weeks, rumors had been circulating. Razed villages, gutted caravans, poisoned wells. No loot, no hostages, just one method: enter, kill, leave. Only 2 riders, the survivor said. He had listened to these accounts with strained vigilance, not entirely believing them. But as the testimonies piled up, he had stopped smiling. Maybe they were just bandits, tribal chiefs drunk on power. But no, it made no sense. Two riders don't take down fortresses, not alone, not without something else. In the high room of the palace, torches crackled on the dry mud walls, casting convulsive shadows on the flaking frescoes. The air was thick, heavy with cold incense, sweat, and tension. The heat seemed to rise from the ground, insidious, as if the entire city was boiling from within. The king, draped in his gold-woven robes, had a waxy complexion and lips stained with medicinal herbs. He was trembling, but pretending to listen. "We must send a messenger to Cad," one of the generals exclaimed. "The great king will know what to do." "Send a messenger?" another hissed. "We might as well send them an invitation. Can't you see it's too late? They are only two men, two riders by all the gods. They have neither chariots, nor banners, nor a protecting deity. Why this fear?" "Because they come from the desert," a rougher voice replied, "and the desert never returns those it swallows." A heavy silence followed. Then another younger general whispered, "We still have the reserves from the sanctuary, and the slaves from the cisterns. Sacrifice the priestess." A murmur of approval shivered along the pillars. Methos, standing motionless in the shadows for long minutes, raised an eyebrow. The priestess had survived 3 wars, 2 epidemics, and 1 tyrannical king. He doubted a belated sacrifice would be enough to make her useful. He said nothing. His arms were crossed beneath his cloak, and his eyes followed the faces like a hawk watching a flock of birds. He wasn't listening so much to what they were saying, as to what they weren't: the panic, the dizziness, the superstition. 2 riders. Only 2, and yet Shartalem trembled. Some spoke of avenging demons descended to purify the corrupted cities, of forgotten ancient gods returned to claim their due. Others, more pragmatic, spoke of a new tactic from the mountain peoples. Methos, for his part, was thinking. He had heard tell of them. Entire villages vanished without leaving survivors, columns of dust that never dissipated. He had first believed it was a legend. Then slowly he had begun to doubt. He knew what 2 men could do, especially if they were like him. He couldn't be sure yet, but he had this dull, insistent feeling that knotted his stomach. Something was approaching, something familiar and profoundly dangerous. There was a mix of intuition, dread, and curiosity within him, an ancient fear, precise, the kind that only his own kind could inspire. The first fire broke out in the south, near the incense market. The second hit the granaries, and the third, the stables. Shartalem was not under siege. There was no army, no catapults, no battle cry. But the city was already burning. It wasn't an attack. It was an orchestrated collapse. In the high room, screams mingled with the smoke. The king no longer listened to anyone. The generals had scattered, some yelling orders without recipients, others fleeing without dignity. Methos said nothing. He felt it before he understood. A wave in the air, a shiver under the skin, a low, bony, deep vibration. They were here. He had doubted it, hoped, perhaps, that he was wrong. But no, it was no longer an impression. It was a fact. 2 presences, 2 like him, and they were close. His feet moved before his thoughts followed them. He knew an exit, a secondary passage, tucked between the offering warehouses and the priest's kitchens, which led to an almost forgotten back courtyard. He walked quickly, without running. Slipping into the shadows was an art, an old habit. He heard behind him the hurried steps, the blades drawn in panic, the prayers shouted to deaf gods. He descended a stone staircase, turned left, pushed open a service door, and stopped. A breath, a silhouette. He was huge. Standing in the middle of the courtyard between the chipped columns, a man, where something that resembled one was staring at him. His torso was bare, painted with ochres and soot, his eyes wide, bloodshot, gleaming. A war axe with a dark blade hung from his powerful arms. His parted mouth formed an uncertain smile, or perhaps a grimace. He said nothing. Neither did Methos. The presence was there, indisputable, heavy like a stone placed on the chest, and immortal, but not like the ones he had already crossed paths with. This one seemed made for war, built for destruction. There was no cunning in his eyes, only a raw, animalistic will. Methos took a step back. His hand slowly went to the hilt of his blade. "I'm not looking for a fight," he said. But the other did not reply. He advanced, one step, then another, and charged. Methos drew his sword in time. The axe whistled inches from his temple, crashing against a pillar in a shower of dust. He backed up, dodged, feinted. He was faster. He had to be. The other brought down his axe like one fells trees. Wide, powerful, brutal blows, but slow. Methos struck on the fly, at the ribs, the arm, the flank. He hit him, wounded him, but the other did not stop, as if pain held no meaning for him. A flagstone gave way beneath their feet. They rolled in the dust. Methos got up first, parried a blow, counterattacked. The Colossus stumbled. Methos leaped. He struck his thigh, then his shoulder, and finally, he disarmed him. The axe fell with a dull thud. The other let out a rough cry, almost a moan. The victor raised his sword. Blood hammered in his temples. He could do it. Now, decapitate, flee, survive. And that's when he felt it. The other presence, right behind him. "If you do that," the voice said, "I will take your head during the quickening." A low voice, calm, the tone of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Methos did not move. He kept the blade raised, his breath held. "And if I turn around without striking?" he asked in a neutral voice. A silence, drawn out. Then you will have the luxury of hearing me speak." He hesitated for a second, then slowly lowered his sword, enough so that the Colossus on the ground was no longer an immediate target, not enough to declare himself defeated. Finally, he turned around. The man facing him was smaller than the wounded giant, but he radiated a denser, more dangerous presence. Like a hidden blade beneath a fur cloak, a metal helmet adorned his forehead, engraved with indistinct symbols. The leather of his breastplate seemed to have been tanned by years of sand and blood. But it was his eyes that Methos couldn't look away from. Clear, probing, and deeply ancient. The man was smiling. He took a step forward. Behind him, the wounded Colossus, still alive, still docile, stood up without a word. "You know what we are," the man said. It wasn't a question. Methos didn't answer. His senses were stretched to the limit. Every fiber of his body told him to flee. But another part, quieter, darker, wanted to understand. "You could have killed him," the man continued. "I was going to. I know, and that's why you interest me." He stopped a few steps away. He wielded no weapon, did not raise his voice. He had no need for threat. He was the threat. "You didn't strike at random," he resumed. "Not out of rage, not out of fear. You were looking for openings. You were waiting for him to tire. You wanted to dominate him, not just survive." He tilted his head slightly. "You didn't scream. You didn't tremble. You thought." A silence. Methos narrowed his eyes. He was looking for the angle, the trap, but there was none. "What exactly are you proposing?" The man smiled. It was a smile without warmth, but not without allure. "A place, not at my feet, by my side. And if I refuse?" He shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "Then I kill you, or him, or both. It doesn't matter. You can choose, predator or prey." He approached another step, calm. Look around you. This city is falling, and you are alone. His gaze locked with Methos's. But you don't have to be. Methos finally lowered his sword, slowly. He could have fled, perhaps. But this man, what he carried within him, there would be no hiding place deep enough, no flight long enough. And something inside him, something very ancient, tensed. Not out of fear, out of recognition. What if he spoke the truth? What if for once, instead of surviving in the gaps of history, he could shape it? No longer survive, but impose. He crossed his arms. Very well, he said. I'm listening. There was no name for what they were. Not yet. Not at this time. They passed like a plague on horseback, leaving behind ash, blood, and silence. In the devastated countryside and dead cities, people spoke of shadows mounted on black horses, of screaming ghosts, of beasts that laughed while killing, and always the same number, 4. 4 horsemen. Caspian was the last to join them. Kronos, Silas, and Methos had already been riding together for several decades. 3 faces of the same night, the will, the strength, the mind. They followed the dusty roads through the Hindu Kush mountains, descended toward Assyria, then branched off to the west. They had neither kingdom nor fortress. They ravaged, then disappeared, like plague winds. It was in a remote valley, south of the Caspian Sea, that they stumbled upon him. A gutted village, already plundered, half the houses smoldering. But something was wrong. This was not their work. Kronos dismounted first. He observed the corpses, the blade marks, the remnants of ritualistic staging. Severed arms arranged like crowns, gouged eyes neatly aligned. This is not a simple plunder, Silas growled. No, Methos murmured. It's a warning. And then they felt him, and they heard him. A laugh, dry, high-pitched, out of sync with the silence. He was there, in the center of the square, bare-chested, his arms covered in dried blood. Busy carving what remained of an already drained body. His hair was plastered to his face. His eyes shone with an unstable gleam. He held a jawbone in his hands and was clicking it like a puppet. When Kronos approached, he raised his head. He was smiling. No astonishment, no fear, just a vague interest, as if judging whether they were worth killing in turn. Did you do this all by yourself? Kronos asked. The other tilted his head, falsely modest. They had supplies. I don't like to waste. Silas, in the back, let out a grunt. Methos said nothing, but he was watching him. Something was wrong with him. Not like Silas, not like Kronos. A flaw, a badly glued break. Kronos approached closer, slowly. Are you alone? I was. And how long have you been pillaging alone? Time is not important. It starts over often, I think. Kronos did not laugh. He stared at him for a long time. Then, simply, your name? The man shrugged, his eyes bright with an inner fever. I might have had one. It faded away. A silence. The wind blew for a moment between the gutted houses. Kronos turned his head slightly toward Methos, then back to the crouching man. Very well, you will have one. Caspian, since this is where I found you. The newly named man blinked. He tasted the word on his lips, in silence. Then he smiled, a child's smile. Kronos crouched down opposite him, at his level. You could be useful. Caspian opened his eyes wide, almost disappointed. I thought you were going to kill me. Perhaps later. Methos finally approached, meeting Kronos' gaze. He is unstable, he said in a low voice. Kronos did not look away from Caspian. He was smiling. Yes, but he is mine now. And Caspian laughed, a high-pitched, discordant laugh, almost happy. They had descended upon the village like a storm of ash. The noon heat was suffocating, but Silas laughed with every swing of his axe. Kronos led the charge, his face painted black, screaming in a language no one spoke anymore. Caspian had disappeared among the tents, leaping like a jackal, his jerky laughter bouncing off the stretched hides and charred steaks. He tore through the canvas at random, ransacked supplies, and tossed torches into the air like toys. The screams he left behind no longer belonged to the living. Methos, for his part, was calm. He advanced without haste, his eyes alert. He did not kill unnecessarily. He searched. And then he felt her, a faint yet distinct vibration. Not fully awake yet, but present. He followed it through the screams, through the smoke. She was there, bent over a wounded body, her hands stained with blood, her eyes feverish. She was still trying to heal. In the midst of death, she still hoped to save. She was young, beautiful, no doubt. But that wasn't what held Methos. It was the strange light she carried within her. A dormant force, the premonition of something that would last too long. He stopped a few steps away. She saw him, slowly straightened up. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She looked him straight in the eye. "If you've come to kill me, do it quickly," she said. Her voice was hoarse, dignified. He didn't answer. He approached. He could feel this possibility beating within her. Not yet an immortal, but she would become one. He leaned toward her, slowly, and took a small dagger from his belt, an almost tender gesture. "You haven't started yet," he murmured. "What?" she said, frowning. He plunged the blade into her heart. She collapsed without a cry. The looting continued behind them. The screams, the flames, the laughter. But Methos did not move. He sat near the body, crossed his legs, and waited. A while later, as the sun began to set, Cassandra sat up, gasping for breath. She was back, and she belonged to him. They had made their camp near a dried riverbed between two wind-torn dunes. The horses slept with hollowed flanks. The screams that night had ceased earlier. All that remained was the warmth of the fire and her, Cassandra. She sometimes slept. Not truly. She collapsed from exhaustion, wrists bound, muscles tense, dreams always alert. She had understood very quickly that Methos was not like the others. He was less brutal, less cruel, but not innocent. He took her as one takes an object as one's own, without rage, without laughter, without visible pleasure, just because she belonged to him. She had thought he would spare her, but that term didn't exist here. Only nuances in violence. So she made herself gentle, docile. She lowered her eyes. She learned to feel the moment when her gestures became the right ones, when her silences were better than her words. She never believed he loved her, but she thought perhaps that he preserved her, or rather, that he protected her from the others to keep her for himself. That was already a lot. And above all, as long as she satisfied him, she wouldn't end up in Kronos' tent, under Caspian's teeth, or at Silas's mercy. And she knew in her body and her heart that it would be worse. So she played her role. She listened when he spoke of dead languages and collapsed temples. She nodded when he mentioned medicinal plants whose effects she already knew. And sometimes, when he fell asleep against her, she kept her eyes open. For a long time, because one must never, ever believe one is safe, even with the most human of monsters. And he had started to believe she was different. She never screamed. She obeyed, with a gesture, a look. She let him do as he wished. And sometimes she smiled. Not a real smile. Not for him, but enough for Methos to see what he wanted in it. He thought, some nights, that she was getting used to him, that she was starting to understand. that she perhaps accepted to stay. But she stayed because with him, she risked less, and he preferred not to see that fear, well learned, could look like loyalty. She still didn't know what she was. He had never told her. Too dangerous. Knowing meant understanding that she could kill them. Knowing meant looking for a sword, a moment alone, and escape. So he lied. He stabbed her sometimes, as an example. And when she came back to life, he weaned over her, his hand resting on her throat, and whispered, "I let you come back. Never forget who you owe that to." She nodded. She said nothing, but her eyes, sometimes, shone with a silent hatred. "She listens to you as if you were a god," Caspian had mocked one evening, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "What did you put in her mouth to keep her quiet like that?" Methos hadn't answered. Silas had growled, busy dividing skulls like trophies. But that night, a new tension settled. A few days later, an argument erupted over a necklace snatched from a priestess. Caspian wanted it. Silas had already hung it on his belt. The two came to blows. A beast's struggle. Sand, teeth, blood. Methos separated them with an authoritarian gesture. "Enough." Caspian stared at him, breathless. He smiled, slowly. "Playing the boss now? Or is it because you're scared we'll touch your bitch?" The word landed like a slap. He advanced toward Cassandra, his fingers outstretched. A shiver of panic crossed the young woman's eyes. Methos blocked his wrist. "She is mine," he said. Caspian burst out laughing. "You kept her warm for yourself, huh? But we share everything between brothers, don't we?" A silence. Then a voice, deep, cutting. "Since when do you get attached, Methos?" Kronos was there, motionless, but ready to strike. Methos looked at him. He knew that look. He knew what Kronos was going to do. And he understood what he had to do if he wanted to survive. If he wanted to stay among them. If he wanted to keep the place he had taken centuries to forge. So he stayed silent. He looked down and he let Kronos approach. What followed, he didn't see. He stayed apart, sitting, alone near the fire, his fists clenched until they bled, his jaw locked. He heard the steps, the breaths, the laughter. Silas, Caspian, Kronos, and her. She didn't scream. Not for him. The fire was slowly dying in the morning wind. Around the camp, the remnants of the night stretched out. Ashes, dried blood, the grunts of poorly fed horses. Silas and Caspian were sleeping on the ground. Kronos was not there, gone hunting no doubt, or contemplating the next slaughter. Methos stood alone, near the embers. He hadn't slept. He had heard. Every breath, every groan, every gesture torn from Cassandra as a tribute. She approached him without a sound. He didn't understand right away. The ropes were gone from her wrists. She walked with a calm, straight step, as if nothing could frighten her anymore. And in her eyes, nothing. No visible anger. Just a tranquil stillness, even more frightening. She knew what she was going to do, and so did he. He could have stood up, stopped her, a word, a gesture, and she would have frozen. He was stronger, faster, but he did nothing. He barely straightened up, just enough to look her in the face. "Cassandra!" His voice was just a breath, neither a plea nor a reproach. She didn't answer. She stopped in front of him, looked at him, for a long time. Not with hatred, with knowledge, as if she were seeing him for the first time. And then, without a word, she raised her hand. The bronze shard barely gleamed in the pale light, a simple fragment cut from an old copper plate. She plunged it into his chest, just below the sternum. He fell to his knees, without a cry. She said nothing. She walked around him, and she ran. Far, fast, without looking back. When Methos came back to life, Cassandra had disappeared. He remained there for a moment, his hands full of dust, his throat tight, and his eyes empty. He could have lied, said she had been abducted, that another group had taken her. But he said nothing, because he understood, because he had wanted her to leave, and because at that precise moment, something within him had broken. It wasn't love. It was worse. It was shame, and it would not die. They had continued, year after year, pillage after massacre. Always four, always the same dance of fire, blades, and terror. And Methos had endured, because it was simpler, because he had to survive, because he hadn't yet found the moment when leaving would be less risky than staying. But that moment had come. It hadn't announced itself with a scream, nor with a wound, nor with a new horror. It had come in the silence, in the cold indifference he felt with every new village burned, in the almost methodical boredom of their actions, which had become mechanical. They still killed, yes, but he no longer felt anything, and that was the worst. He looked at Kronos and no longer saw a war king, just a creature of blood, a man frozen in his own fury. He had tried once to talk, to propose something else, to build a kingdom, to rule differently. Through fear, yes, but with rules. To become more than shadows, to become memory. Kronos had laughed, softly, like one laughs at a child who dreams. And Methos understood. There would never be an end, never a respite, unless he created it. He was alone that night, sitting apart from the camp, his gaze lost in the flames. Silas was sleeping. Caspian was dreaming aloud. Kronos was at the top of a hill, scrutinizing the shadows as if seeking enemies or gods there. Methos held a vial between his fingers, an ancient concoction, a discreet poison. He didn't want his quickening, he just wanted to neutralize him. He could have left without it, fled, but Kronos would have found him, always. He knew him too well, and Kronos too, somewhere, knew him, so he had to be cunning. He stared at the vial for a long time, turned it between his fingers. No anger, no remorse, just an ancient fatigue, like armor that had become too heavy. "Not sleepy?" Kronos asked without turning around. When Methos approached, he was crouched at the edge of a rocky promontory, his eyes lost in the plain. "Not really," Methos replied. He offered a water skin. Wine, old but drinkable. Kronos took it without suspicion. He drank, a long gulp. "You're becoming generous," he said, wiping his mouth. Methos barely smiled. "Perhaps, or perhaps I'm tired of keeping everything to myself." The wind was blowing hard, raising dust around them. Kronos sat down. "Do you think it will ever end?" Methos asked, almost distracted. Kronos shrugged. "Nothing ends. Everything rots, and that's what we're here for." He finally turned his head toward him. "You're strange tonight. Too calm, too light." Methos met his gaze. "And you, too lucid. You know, don't you?" Kronos stared at him for a long time. Then he smiled. "Of course, 4 weeks. You are no longer one of us." His hand slipped toward the hilt of his sword, but already his muscles were trembling. The poison was taking effect. He staggered. "What have you done?" Methos approached, supported him so he wouldn't fall. What had to be done? Kronos wanted to speak again, but his tongue was already freezing. His body stiffened. Methos laid him on the ground, slowly, like a sick brother. He had prepared the place days earlier. An old well, sealed by a slab. Chains, symbols traced with ash. a forgotten hiding spot in the Thracian hills. He dragged Kronos' body there under the moon. Not a word, not a regret, just the weight of the inevitable. He placed him at the bottom of the well, still alive, eyes open, fixed by the poison. "You will not die," he murmured. He pushed the slab back into place. 1, 2, 3 stones, then the last one, and he sealed the surface with mud and ashes. Without ceremony, he stood there for a moment, his hand resting on the stone. Then he turned his back, and he left. He left nothing behind. Not a word, not a sign. Silas and Caspian wouldn't look for him for long. They would think it was a whim, a wandering, one more disappearance. He walked, day after day, without aim, without direction, just to put time between himself and what he had been. But for the first time in centuries, he was fleeing by choice. Methos opened his eyes again. The road scrolled slowly beneath the headlights, a pale, straight band between the sleeping streets. Silas was still driving, silent, focused. A tense calm hovered, too fragile to be peaceful. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, not daring to stare. She said nothing, asked him no questions, but he knew. She had seen, she had understood, and he could still taste the dust in his mouth. He had believed himself healed, cleansed of those centuries. He had told himself that the present could be rewritten without reopening the tombs. He had lied to himself. What had happened in the warehouse? Everything had surged back, as if nothing had ever been buried. He thought he had fled. He had only gone in circles. And now, he had nowhere left to hide, not even behind the centuries.